Shalom. Yeah, here we are 1 week into 2022, and I just figured I'd try and do a short little video tonight. Shabbat has begun here in Jerusalem, and there's some people that have been asking, several people asking us what's happening in Israel, what's going on, and I've tried to avoid the controversy of, take a vaccine, don't take a vaccine. But there are some very troubling things that are happening. People that have taken the vaccine, it's okay. I'm not pointing a finger at anyone. But I've seen something just totally unexpected and quite sad happening amongst the body of believers in Israel. And it's pretty much the same amongst the unbelievers. And there's been some serious division and separation. And I've tried to avoid those kinds of debates and arguments. But there's something very troubling happening. I was born to both my parents, Holocaust survivors. My father lost his entire family in Auschwitz. My mother lost all of her family except for two people in Auschwitz, and that's where she met my father. And it all began for them, both of them quite young. My mother was like 18 years old when she was shipped off to Auschwitz, and my father was in his early 20s. And just a couple of years before, they were in a boxcar heading to a death camp where their entire family would be murdered. They were free people, and they could go to the grocery store. There wasn't a whole lot. My mother came from Eastern Europe, Romania, my father from Greece. But, there was the freedoms that we all take for granted. And things began to happen, not rapidly all at once, but it became quite obvious as time went on that systematically, if you were Jewish, you were losing rights. You were being categorized as somebody that was much more inferior and a threat to others. And, most of the Jewish people couldn't, my mother was like 18 years old and saying, "What did I do to you guys? Why do I have to wear a yellow star? Why does that prohibit me from going into this place or that place?" And my father as well. And then, as things went on, the Nazis, with the help of the Greek government in Greece and with the Romanian government in Romania, started saying, "No, you're a threat. You're not the same as the others. And we're going to begin to isolate you." First, they isolated them by prohibiting them from doing certain things. And that isolation got stronger and stronger and stronger until the time came they said, "Listen, we won't even let you stay living where you are anymore. Now you must report to this place on this day, and if you don't, we're coming to get you." And so in great fear, fear was a great big part of the motivation back in the late 30s and into the early 40s. And so many people did things that they didn't really want to, but they were afraid of the consequences. And it led to ultimately millions of Jews being sent off to concentration camps, and many of them never ever came back. My father's entire family, uncles, aunts, you name it, they went. and they never came back. My father's the only one out of that family. It was a big family. And my mother, also a very big family, all put in a boxcar, sent to Auschwitz. It kind of promises that we'll take care of you there, but you can't stay where you are anymore. You're just going to have to leave everything you've ever had behind. And without going into all of the detail, I'm watching as I'm 71 years old, and the Holocaust ended like 75 years ago. They were liberated from Auschwitz. That's where my mother and father left that camp. Just skeletons walking away, and their only offense was that they were born Jewish. And now, here I am in the nation of Israel, as well as many other nations. The only crime we've committed is that we've refused to take an experimental procedure which has no evidence of any kind of efficacy. The hospitals have several people in there that are infected with this COVID virus. And the stats that have been coming out suggest that the majority are people that have had this procedure done to themselves more than once, maybe two or three. And they're the ones that are getting sick in larger numbers. But, I just want to put this call out there asking people to pray. And this is on such a large scale, and it goes far beyond just Jewish people now. It's people that have made a choice. There's absolutely no scientific evidence that we pose a threat as people that have not been received this medical procedure. And there's just overwhelming evidence, even from the man that created this, the science and the chemistry behind this procedure, as to its danger. But systematically, we're starting to be closed in. 10 days ago, the government of Israel was talking about putting bands on everybody's arm if they wanted to go into a mall or into an area where there was a lot of shops. And if you didn't have the credentials showing that you had this medical procedure, you wouldn't get a band, which means you were not allowed to go into any store except for maybe a pharmacy or a grocery store. And there's talk about no more grocery stores some point in the future. And even the restrictions on travel in and out of Israel, the government admits at the Supreme Court that they have no scientific foundation for restricting people from leaving Israel. The court said, explain to us how that's a threat to the citizens of Israel if they just want to fly away on a vacation or for a visit or for work or whatever. And they still persist in these kinds of rules. So, we need to be aware the rights of people are being trampled on, and there's a division amongst the people, even amongst the body of believers. In Israel, it's far beyond 50% of the body have taken this procedure, and it's sad, it's heartbreaking, because Yeshua, Jesus, is no longer the one we look to for our protection, for our health, for our destiny, our leading. That if we have him, do we not have it all? And if we have the faith to trust him, no matter what comes our way, why don't we have the right to walk in that? And why have other believers said, no, that's not good. You're disobeying the government, even though there's no evidence to prove that this thing has any efficacy at all. And so, I'm doing this short little video because in the late 30s and early 40s, Kristallnacht was a night in November many years ago where the Nazis basically said it's a free-for-all. Go and trash the things that belong to the Jewish people because we're going to begin to make an example of them. And, today we have people all over the world losing their jobs, their businesses, because they've chosen to trust God or they've just chosen not to trust the pharmaceutical industry. And we can't just ignore what's happening. And I thank God for the many people that are praying in Israel and outside of Israel. But, there's some people that said this is just like Nazi Germany. And I have to agree completely. If you look at and examine the things that are being done, the isolations that are taking place, and the things that are being proposed to isolate people that are not any kind of a threat to anybody. Actually, it might even be the other way around. There must be a cry to heaven. Many of us are just seeking God, understanding that we've come into the last of the last days. And it looks like the enemy is being allowed by the Lord to do certain things. But that still calls for us to pray when we see injustice. Freedoms that are being taken away, those freedoms are not given to us by the government, any government. Those freedoms were given to us by God. But we now have men and women that are influenced by ungodly kinds of ideas and plans and purposes, taking away the freedoms of many people. And especially, it appears like the body of Messiah in many countries is being targeted to shut down the houses of worship and the places of prayer. And we can't just sit by idly. It's time for us to get on our face and pray. We cannot just submit to and surrender to another Holocaust, because we can see systematically the same steps that were taken back in World War II are underway right now. Canada has concentration camps. They call them COVID camps. They've got them in every province. In Australia, there are many people that are already been confined in these camps. In Germany and Austria. And I strongly believe that the power of our prayers, especially coming from people that are sold out, that allow nothing in this world to interfere with their relationship with God. God is listening to our prayers, and He's going to answer. So we don't do this out of fear, but out of seeking a righteousness, seeking to maintain the freedom that God has given us, and to warn others that are being deceived and that are being divided. Yeshua made a statement. He said, a house divided against itself will not stand. It's so obvious how we are being divided as people, not just as Jews, but as people around the world. So I just want to admonish you all to pray, to seek the Lord, and His wisdom and His guidance in Yeshua's name.